Welcome back to Making Messes. I'm Jamie Harwood and I am back here in my dining room. Seems like some of my crafts lately have started or taken place here in the dining room. And today's craft is no different because I do need a little more room to spread out and I don't have that capability up in my craft room as much as I do down here. So that brings us to today's craft, which is creating an art display using alcohol inks. Alcohol inks are highly pigmented, highly saturated inks that have an isopropyl alcohol base. That you use to create amazing designs. Because of the way the alcohol interacts with the ink, it allows it to flow across whatever surface you're using so that you can kind of guide and manipulate these different inks into amazing patterns. There are a lot of different things you can use alcohol inks on. Any sort of non-porous surface you can use because you're basically going to be moving the ink across it. You can also use it on fabric. It looks a little different there because it does kind of soak into the fabric. You can use it on glazed ceramic. It works the same way as it does with any other non-porous surfaces. You can also use paper. There is a special type of waterproof paper called Yupo paper that has some sort of coating on it that allows the ink to sit on the surface and not actually soak into the paper itself. So why don't I grab my supplies and then we will get started with this craft. Okay, so supplies for an alcohol ink project. There are quite a few things that you're going to need. Obviously, the first thing you're going to need is some sort of surface in which to flow your ink across. These are called cradle boards. I've already started taping them off, but it's basically just a wooden box that has a non-porous surface on the top. You can get these at Michael's or any art store. Michael's, sometimes the top is still wood, but you can just paint it with a white acrylic paint and it will give you the same effect. You do want to tape these off. I've done the first one and two sides of this one. And the reason you want to tape them off is because you want to try to minimize the amount of drips that come down from the ink. So I'm just placing some masking tape, painter's tape, just right on the very edge, flush with the edge. So you're going to need those. The place where I'm going to display them, I'm going to start the pattern on one and kind of extend it onto the other. So when I'm working on these, I'm actually going to have the two of them together and we'll put them together like this so that my pattern will go across the cradle board. You will also need alcohol ink. This is Brea Reese alcohol ink. Here I'm going to be using a blue and a green to match some of the colors in my living room. You will also need isopropyl alcohol, at least 90%. This is the element that kind of helps the ink move across your material much easier. So you will need that. You will also need just a little paint palette so that you can put some of your isopropyl alcohol in it. You will also need a dropper or a pipette, which is what you're going to use to apply the isopropyl alcohol to the materials that you'll be using, in this case the cradle board. I also have what's called a fixative. This is gold. You have to shake it up. It's really just something to add some pretty nice highlights after you're done with the ink. You'll also need a paintbrush that you'll use to actually apply that fixative. You will also need, I'm going to use a straw, something to blow the ink across the surface. I also have a heat tool, an embossing tool that will work. These give very different effects. This also tends to dry the inks out pretty quickly because there is heat involved. This, when I use the straw, is a more concentrated airflow for a particular part of the design. You can also just blow with your mouth and move the ink across that way. Because these are pretty saturated, you are going to want gloves. These inks will stay with you for days if you get them on your fingers. So now the first thing that you're going to want to do is clean off the top of your cradle board. If there are any oils from your fingers, that will inhibit the ink from moving freely. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my isopropyl alcohol I'm just going to spray it across the top here. I'm just going to kind of clean it off with a paper towel. Oops. Still got a little bit of stuff on there. So as I mentioned before, the design that I'm going to be making is going to flow from one cradle board to the next. So I'm going to put them together. Now, if you start this thinking, I know exactly how this is going to turn out, you will be wrong, because it's almost impossible to have the ink go the direction that you want it. It can kind of go in the direction you want it, but for the most part, it's going to go wherever it feels like going. So the first step is I'm going to put some isopropyl alcohol in here in my palette. And then I'm going to try to kind of think about where I want my alcohol ink to flow. And so, as I said, I want to start it here and move it across, probably from this corner up into that corner. And so wherever I put the isopropyl alcohol is where the ink is going to kind of flow. It'll follow that line. So I'm going to fill my dropper with isopropyl alcohol. So I'm going to start down here. Then I'm just going to start laying it down on the cradle board. Get some more where I need it. Gonna need a little bit more of that later on, so we'll get some out there. And now I'm going to come in with my ink. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow the line of where I put the isopropyl alcohol. So as you watch, it's going to start to move as soon as it hits the alcohol. Can you see that it's starting to move a little bit? Now I'm going to help that along by blowing on it. I'm also going to use my heat tool a little bit to move it. See the different patterns it makes? You can see kind of some darker lines where the air has moved it around and it's kind of puddled. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the exact same thing with my green ink. Just going to kind of place it where I would like some green. I think this time I'm going to use the straw so I can concentrate it a little bit more. There's a lot of negative white space down here, so I am going to use my heat tool again to kind of push some of the ink down there. Now you may have noticed that it's not really moving that ink down into this area that I want it to. So the way to fix that is to just add some more alcohol to it, just right here along the edges where I want it to move. And I'm going to come in with the heat tool again. Now you can kind of see why I said that you may think you know where your design is going to go, but it's actually going to go wherever it wants to. So again, I'm still wanting a little bit more down in through here, and so I'm going to use more isopropyl alcohol. Maybe just put another little bit through there. Come in with my ink again on top. I think I'm going to add the green at the same time this time. Because I was wanting that movement across, I feel like I need some more in through here to kind of connect these two. So I'm going to try to use the straw and see if I can kind of move some over there. Looks like the answer is no. So again, a couple drops of isopropyl alcohol. A couple more drops there of ink. I'm going to come in from the top. You can see I had a little bit of a splotch here of some ink. I can kind of lift that up so you can see it a little better. So I can't get rid of that completely, but I can dilute it with the isopropyl alcohol. That will cause it to dilute. Now I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can blow it out a little bit to dilute it more. Like I said, it won't go away completely, but it can kind of become part of your design by doing that. So there are a lot of different techniques that you can also do once you've kind of got a basic design laid down here. One of the things that you can do is make kind of, I guess, kind of a blooming effect, maybe a little bit like algae. And to do that, you're just going to drop small drops on any area that you want a little bit of texture. Like this is a pretty broad area with not an awful lot going on. So I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to put a drop of alcohol in it. As you can see, it kind of starts to bloom a little bit. Hold that up so you can see it a little more. So maybe I want to do one over here as well. Just another one. Now, if you begin to blow on it, will cause that bloom to kind of dilute out a little bit and not be quite as dramatic as this one is. Another thing that you can do is you can take your isopropyl alcohol and create a stippling effect using the spray bottle. And so you kind of put your hands where you don't want it to go, and I'm going to kind of focus mine over here. And I'm just going to first make sure it will spray out, come about, I don't know, 12 inches above, and just spray it like that. As you can see, it creates kind of a mottled stippling effect. Look at it down here, it's really pretty through there. I think I'd like to do that in a couple more spaces, so I'm going to maybe come in up here at the top, maybe a little bit down here. And as you can see, it's just creating that stippling, very textured look. So as I'm looking at this, there are kind of some really harsh lines, such as up in through here where this green has been kind of pooling and has not been very diluted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm just going to add some more. That's the nice thing about this, is that even after it has dried, if you reapply alcohol to its isopropyl alcohol, it basically reactivates it and you continue doing whatever it is that you're wanting to do with it. So I'm going to come in on these these harder lines, add some alcohol, and then again use my straw or my heat tool or and it just softens those lines up and kind of takes away the hard edges. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit more down here where I had that kind of splotch of blue. Add some more alcohol and then come in a couple drops of green, one more of blue. You can already see it's beginning to move on its own without any help from me. What do you think? I really kind of like it. Can you imagine this on a scarf that you might wear, or as the back of a card, a greeting card that you sent to someone? Now I'm going to come in again where we added this blue and this green and do just a little bit of the stippling by adding the isopropyl alcohol. Did you see how quickly that stippled? Doesn't take much time at all. Now, one of the other things that you can do to kind of add, I don't know, just a little bit of a more luxurious look is to add a mixative. This is the gold color I told you about. This you do need to shake pretty well. Basically, I'm just going to put it in my paint palette. You don't need very much. And that's what you're going to use your paintbrush for. First, you want to get your paintbrush, just dip it in the isopropyl alcohol and then just kind of get off as much as you can. Dip it in the fixative. And this you can do any way you want. If you see a spot that you think would benefit from some of this gold coloring, you can just kind of drop it in, just like that. Let me show you what that looks like a little closer. And it will begin to move as well with the alcohol. So again, you can just come in and just kind of drop it wherever you think would be a great spot. You also can move it a little bit by blowing on it. When you add the gold mixative to it, it really starts to look a little like granite or stone. Just makes it look a little nicer. And you also, if you want, can drop a little bit of alcohol, say just a little bit right there, and then add the mixative right to it. Add a little bit more to my palette. Come in and play with this a little bit more. Get it to seem a little stronger. So really at this point, you're just kind of playing with it, dropping this in wherever you think it might enhance your project a little bit. completely up to you. So I really like the way that this has turned out. Hold it up a little bit for you to see it. As I mentioned, I'm going to display these on the wall right next to one another, so it does kind of look like the pattern has moved from one cradle board to the next. And so I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to let them dry. What I wanted to show you before you go is, this is one that I was working on just on the Yapu paper that I was telling you about. Obviously it dripped on the back, which actually is kind of pretty, but to show you that I did this a couple of days ago and I can still come in and reactivate it by just adding the alcohol. So I just have to drip the alcohol on wherever I want it. You can see how it moves the same as it did that first day when I was working with it. Same with the gold. I can come in and kind of add it wherever I think it'll make it look a little more luxurious. So if you have created something and you look at it for a few days and think, you know what, it's just not exactly how I want it to look, well, all you have to do is add some alcohol and you can start all over with it. Well, that's alcohol ink. Not difficult at all. It's a little messy, but that's what making messes is about. So I hope that you enjoyed this and I hope that you will try it on your own. So alcohol inks, super easy, super fun. If you're one of those people that really need to maintain control over how your crafts turn out, this may not be the craft for you because really that ink just does what it wants to do. But it makes absolutely amazing patterns, different textures. There's so many different things that you can do with it. I'm excited to have mine dry and get it up on the wall. So I really do hope that you get the supplies and try this yourself. Like I said, it's super fun, super easy. So again, thank you for joining me here on Making Messes. I hope to see you next time. Be safe, be well.